Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be looking at a full beginner's guide to Python, and these are the concepts that we're going to be seeing, and I've included timestamps and chapters in the video if you want to jump around. Before we get started, please like the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So what we're going to do is go over and create a new file. We're just going to call it variables.py, as it's a Python file. It's going to have the .py extension. And once we're here, we're going to look at what variables are. A variable is simply a container of a certain data type. So it is used to store numbers, strings, or Boolean values. So in Python, to create a variable, all you have to do is put the name of the variable on the left and put an equal sign and put the value that variable is going to store to the right. So for example, if we wanted x to be the variable name and we wanted to assign the value 4, this is how we would do it. We could have another variable y, we can set it to 5. This is a variable that stores numbers. We could also have variables that store strings. For example, name, you can set it equals to able. To store a Boolean value, we are going to follow the same steps. So we would name our variable is underscore student, and we can set that either to true or to false. Here, when we write true or false, we need to make sure that the T and the F is capital. So these are the 3 different data types that you can store in variables in Python. So using the print statement we saw in the previous video, we can print these values. So for example, we can print is underscore student, save the file, and we can go to the right and run it. As you can see, it prints true. We could also print name, we can print x, we can print y. Another thing we can do is add variables. So for example, we can add x to y, and we should get 9. As you can see in the terminal, it prints 9. When the plus operator is used between 2 numbers, it's used to add. But when we use it with a string, it's used to concatenate. That means it puts 2 strings together. So we could have another variable called father's name, and we can set it to Gideon. Then we can print name plus father name. We can save the file and we can run it. As you can see, it prints able Gideon, but there's no space in between because we didn't add a space. So we could manually add a space in between and add another plus sign. So here it's going to print my full name, as you can see. Something else we can do is we can combine strings and numbers. So for example, if we wanted to say Abel Gideon is, we could add a string is, we are going to put in my age here is going to be a number, so we're going to put a space, then we're going to put a variable here, and we're going to finish it off with years old. So we can have a variable, let's call it age, and let's set it to 19. And we could put the age variable here, and let's see what happens when we run it. As you can see, we get an error. It says can only concatenate strings. So what we need to do is convert the age variable into a string. It's currently a number. So all we have to do is go to the age variable and type in str, and in parentheses we're going to have our age variable. What this is going to do is convert age from a number to a string. So we can save our file and run it again. And as you can see, it prints Abel Gideon, 19 years old. So that's all about variables, and the next topic we're going to be looking at is taking input from a user. So let's clear this out. And what we need for taking input is the input function. So let's say we wanted to ask the user for their name. So we're going to create a variable called name, and we're going to set it equal to input. And inside the input parentheses, we're going to put in the prompt, or what we want to ask the user. So we're going to put in enter your name. Then we're going to simply print out hello space, and we're going to use the concatenation, which is the plus operator, plus name. So we're going to save our file and we're going to run it. As you can see at the bottom, it asks us for our name. We can put in Abel, and it prints out hello Abel. So this is how you take input from a user. By default, when you take input, it's a string. So for example, if you wanted to take an age, you would have to cast the age using the method we used previously. To cast our age, you need to cast it into whatever data type you want. So here we're going to do a little exercise, and we're going to also get introduced to comments. Comments in Python are lines of code or lines of statements that are not going to be executed. They're just there for other purposes. So we're going to write a comment. So the comment is just going to explain what our program is going to do. So our program is going to ask user for age, and it's going to tell them their age and 5 years. So what's the first thing we need to do? We need to ask the user for their age. So we're going to use a variable called age, and we're going to set it equal to input, and we're going to make the prompt enter your age. And once we've got their age, we need to add 5 to it and store it into another variable. As I said before, the input function is going to return a string, but we want a number so we can add it with 5. So we're going to create another variable called age in 5 years, and we're going to set it equal to age plus 5. Here we would be adding a string, which is age, to a number, which is not possible. So we need to convert this age into an integer. So we're going to use int, and in parentheses we're going to have age. Then finally we're going to print out the following statement. We're going to tell them you will be, followed by the concatenation operator, age in 5 years. We're going to continue with a string, years old in 5 years. So now we can save our program and see if it works. So now we can also run it with the terminal as I showed you in the previous video. So we're going to run it from here. We're going to put in Python 3 followed by the name of our file, which is variables.py. It's asking us for our age. I'm going to put in 19. It seems we've got an error. So what is the error? It's saying can only concatenate strings and not int. Well, that is because age in 5 years, we've converted it into an integer. So we are trying to concatenate a string and an integer here. So that is not possible. They all need to be the same type for concatenation. So what we need to do is convert age in 5 years back into a string. So we're going to just cast it using str, and in parentheses we're going to have age in 5 years. Now we can save the program again. We're going to clear our terminal and put in Python 3, the name of our file, variables.py. It asks us for our age. We put in 19. As you can see, it says you will be 24 years old in 5 years. When we talk about conditionals, we just mean decision making. So we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it Conditionals and Loops. And we're going to use the .py extension as always. So as I said, conditionals are used for decision making. That means if a certain condition is true, we want to run a certain piece of code. and if it's not true, we want to run another piece of code. So a simple example would be if we had age to be equal to 19, we could use one of the most simplest conditionals, which is the if statement. So we're going to use that. We're going to say if age is greater than 20, we want to print you are older than 20. So what's going to happen here is the if statement is going to check the age variable, which is currently 19, which is not greater than 20. So when we run this code, it should not print anything. So we can run it. As you can see, nothing gets printed out. That is because the condition in the if statement, which is age is greater than 20, is not true. So let's say we make age equal to 23. And we're going to save our file. We're going to run it. And as you can see, now it says you are older than 20. So this is how the if statement works. Now, if, for example, the condition in the if statement doesn't work, we can have an else statement, which is going to be if whatever the if condition is not true, run this piece of code. So if we put our age back to 19, we can have an else statement, which is going to print you are younger than 20. So if we now save the file and run it, we can see that it prints out you are younger than 20. So this is the basics of conditionals. Next, we're going to be looking at loops. We use loops when we want to repeat a certain piece of code multiple times. So there are two types of loops in Python. There's a for loop and a while loop. First, we're going to be looking at a while loop. So we're going to have a number. We're going to say, let's call it num, and we're going to set it equal to 0. And we're going to look at while loop. So we're going to have the while keyword followed by a condition. So as long as this condition is true, whatever is in the while loop is going to continue to run. So we're going to have the condition while num is less than 10. What we want to do is print num. If we ran this code, since num is 0, which is always going to be less than 10, we would run into an infinite loop. So that means the loop would never end. So in order to avoid that, we're going to increase num each time by 1. So now if we run the code, we can see that our code prints out the numbers from 0 to 9. So that is how a while loop works. Another type of loop is a for loop. So in order to have the same output using a for loop, we're going to have the following piece of code. We're going to have the for keyword, and we're going to have a name of a temporary variable which we're only going to be using inside the for loop. Let's call it num. So we're going to say for num in range. Range is another function that we haven't looked at. It's just a range of numbers in this case. So it's going to be, if we say for num in range 10, so it means num is going to be in the range starting from 0 up to 10, but not including 10, which we'll see when we run the code. So using this syntax, we're going to print num. As you can see, we don't have to increase num each time when we're using for loops. That is because the range function does that for us. So now we can save the file and we could run it. And as you can see, it again prints from 0 to 9. Now what we're going to do is, using what we've looked at, conditionals and loops, we're going to write a small program, a small guessing game. So we're going to have a comment that says guessing game, and what we're going to do first is have our number, the number our user has to guess. So we can call that the secret number, and for now we're going to just set it equal to 4. So what we need to do is first we need to take the input from the user. We're going to store it in a variable called guess, and we're going to have input, and we're going to prompt them to enter your guess. Here, if you remember, we said that input by default returns a string, but in this case, since our secret number is a integer, we want our guess to also be an integer. So we saw an example of casting a variable from a string to an integer. We can also do the same thing to our input prompt. So we could cast it to an integer. That means whatever the user guesses is going to be converted into an integer. Now we're going to start our while loop, which is going to run as long as our user or our user's guess is not equal to our secret number. So we're going to have a while, and the condition is going to be guess is not equals to, the symbol for not equals to in Python is an exclamation mark followed by an equal sign, secret number. So this loop is going to run as long as our user has not got the number. So we want to give our user a certain hint each time. So we're going to compare the guess and the secret number, and we're going to tell them if it's too high or too low. So to do that, we're going to use the other concept we just saw, which is conditionals. So we're going to have an if statement, which is going to see if guess is less than secret number. That means they guessed too low, so we're going to tell them that their guess is too low. Else, that means if their guess is greater than our secret number, we are going to use the else statement for that. We're going to print out guess is too high. So this is going to tell them whether their guess is too low or too high. So now what we're going to do is write a piece of code outside the while loop, and I'm going to explain how it's going to run. So outside the while loop, we're going to print out congratulations, you have won. So why have I put this outside the while loop? So in this case, the while loop is going to run as long as the guess is not equal to the secret number. That means this whole piece of code will only run if guess is not equal to secret number. So if the guess is equal to secret number, our program is going to skip this whole while loop and it's going to go to the bottom statement, which is congratulations, you have won. So that means if guess is equal to secret number, that means the user has won, and it's going to skip the while loop and it's going to go to the final print statement. Now let's see if everything works correctly. So we're going to save our file, and this time we're going to run it from the terminal using Python 3 conditionals _loops.py. It's asking us to enter our guess. Let's say we enter 1. Our loop seems to be going infinitely. That means there's something wrong with our while loop. So when you've accidentally got into an infinite loop and you want the terminal to stop, you're going to use the shortcut Ctrl+C. I believe it's Command+C for Mac users. So using the Ctrl+C, we can break the loop, and now we can go back to our code and see what is causing our loop to go infinitely. The problem here is that we are not repeatedly asking the user to enter a guess. Here, since our guess variable is outside the while loop, it's only going to ask the user to enter a guess once, but we want to ask the user each time. So we're going to copy this line and we're going to put it on the top of our while loop. Now we're going to save our file again, and we're going to run it using Python 3 followed by the name, and we're going to press enter. Okay, it asks us to enter our guess again. We're going to put in 1. It asks us to enter our guess again. This is not right because we need our program to tell us if our guess is too low or too high. So again, we're going to use the Control-C command to end our program, and we are going to go back to our code. This is happening because we are taking the guess. So we entered 1 here, and the while loop checks if 1 is not equal to secret number, then it asks us to guess again. So the problem here is that we need to move this guess variable to the bottom of our while loop. So the guess we entered is going to get compared to the secret number as soon as we enter the while loop. So we need to cut this line and put it at the bottom of our while loop. So again, for the 3rd time, we're going to save our file and we're going to see if it works. It says enter your guess. We're going to enter 1. So it works now. It says guess is too low. So we're going to enter a number like 7. It says guess is too high. That means it's less than 7. We're going to put in 5. It says guess is too high again. So we're going to put in 3. It says guess too low. So the only number logically left is 4. So we're going to guess 4. And as you can see, it says, congratulations, you have won. We faced a little bit of inconvenience, but we ended up fixing the code. So we're going to go ahead and create a new file, which we're going to call containers, which will make sense after we explain what each term is. So when we look at lists, dictionaries, and tuples, they're all containers. That means different values can be stored in them. So the first one we're going to be looking at is lists. To create a list, we're going to be using square brackets. So how we would do it is first we would input the name of the list. So let's call it name, and we'll have an equal sign and we'll have 2 square brackets, and inside these square brackets is where we're going to store different values. In Python, unlike other programming languages, lists can have different data types. That means one list can contain a string and a number together. So let's say we want to store different names. Let's say Abel. And when we want to add another element, we're going to have a comma. That means each element is going to be separated by a comma. And let's say Ebenezer. So this is a list in Python which contains 2 elements, Abel and Ebenezer. We can also save numbers in a list. So let's call it numbers, and we can save the numbers 1, 2, and 3 inside the list. Another thing we can do is have numbers and strings together. So let's just call it combo, and we can have Abel and let's say the numbers 2 and 3. So in Python, you can store different data types in one list. So using the print function, which we learned in our first video, we can print out the different lists. So we're going to say print, and inside the parentheses, we're going to put in the name of the list. Now we can run our code. First, let's clear our terminal. We're going to type in Python 3 followed by containers.py. As you can see, it prints out Abel, Ebenezer. We can also print out the other list. So let's say we wanted to print out combo. We can save and we can run it again, and it prints out Abel, 2, 3. And another thing we can do is use loops. So we can use the for loop, for example, to loop through each element of our list and print it out. So to do that, we're going to use the for keyword followed by the temporary variable, which is going to store each element of our list. So we're going to just call it item in. So we want to iterate through, let's say, the combo list. So we're going to say for item in combo. We want to print item, which is going to be storing each value of our lists. So we're going to save our file and we're going to run it. As you can see, it iterates through the whole list and prints Abel, then 2, then 3. So that is what we can use for loops for. Another thing we can do is access a separate or an individual element from our list. So let's say from our numbers list, we want to access the number 2. In Python, how indexing works is index starts from 0. That means the number here in the numbers list, the number 1 is at position 0, the number 2 is at position 1, and the number 3 is at position 2. So if we wanted to access the number 2, it would be at position 1. So what we would do is, let's say we wanted to print it out. So we're going to have our print statement, and we're going to write the name of our list, and in square brackets we're going to put in the position we want to print. So as we said, 2 is at position 1, so we're going to say numbers, and in square brackets we're going to have 1. Now we can save our file and we can run it, and as you can see, it prints out 2. So that is how you access elements in a list. And there are different type of actions you can do to a list, like adding elements to the list, sorting the list, reversing the list. There are many. So in order to access them, if you're using Visual Studio Code, all you have to do is write the name of your list, let's say numbers, and put in the dot operator. As soon as you put in the dot, you will see a list of different words like reverse, sort, append, extend, remove, and insert. We will be looking at each of them. So let's start with append. What append does is add an element to the end of your list. So let's say we wanted to add the number 4 to the end of the numbers list. So all we have to do is say numbers dot append, and in parentheses we're going to put in the element we want to add, which is 4. So we can save our file and we can print out numbers to see the change. So we're going to go to our terminal and run it, and as you can see, 4 is added to the end of our list, and that is how append works. Now let's write numbers again, and let's see another method or another action we can do with lists. Let's see the insert function. So the insert function is when you want to add an element, but you don't want to add it to the end of the list. So you wanted to add it somewhere in the middle of the list. Let's say you wanted to add the number 100 at position 1, which is where 2 is. So we want to add 100, and we want our list to look like 1, 100, 2, 3. So what we would do is, in the insert function, first we were going to put in the position where we want 100 to be placed. We want it to be placed in position 1. Remember, indexing starts from 0, so we want it to be positioned at 1. Next, we're going to put in the value we want to put at that position, which is 100. Now we can save our file and we can print numbers and see the change. So we're going to go to our terminal and run it. As you can see, it prints out 1, 100, 2, 3, 4. Next, we're going to be looking at another method, which is going to be extend. Extend means if you want to add another list to the end of your own list. So we already have a list 1, 2, 3, and let's say we wanted to add another list of 300, 400, and 500 at the end. So we're going to extend our numbers list. So we're going to say numbers dot extend, and in parentheses we're going to have another list that we want to add at the end, which is going to be 300, 400, and let's say 25. Now we can save our file, and we're going to print numbers so we can see the change, and we're going to save our file and go to the terminal and run it. And as you can see at the last output, it's 1, 100, 2, 3, 4, then the list we extended, which is 300, 400, and 25. Next, we're going to be looking at something you can do to a list. So we're going to say numbers dot sort. So when you want to sort a list, you obviously don't have to give it anything. You just want your list to be sorted. So in the parentheses is going to be empty. So we're going to run numbers.sort, which should sort our list in ascending order. That means from the smallest to the largest. So we're going to print numbers and see if it worked. And we're going to run it. As you can see, it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 25, 100, 300, and 400. That means it has been sorted. And the last method we're going to see with lists is the reverse method, which just does what it says it does. So it's going to reverse our list. So if we print numbers, it should be in reverse order. So we're going to run it. As you can see, it's in reverse order, starting from 400 to 1. There is one last action with list we can do that we didn't see, which is the remove function, which is used to simply just remove a number. So let's say we wanted to remove the element 400 from our lists. We can just say remove, and we're going to put in 400. And we're going to print numbers. And we're going to run our file. As you can see, in the last list, 400 has been removed. So this is all about the basics of lists. Next, we're going to be looking at dictionaries. So in order to create a dictionary, we're going to be using curly braces. But what is a dictionary? A dictionary is a container just like a list, but it contains key value pairs, just like in an actual dictionary. In an actual dictionary, there are keywords and definitions together. So it's a key value pair. So let's say we have a dictionary that's called alpha num, and we're going to set it equal to, as I said, we're going to be using curly braces. And the syntax is, first you put in the key, then you put a colon, then you put the value. So let's say our dictionary is just going to convert numbers from their written form to their number form. So it's going to be 1 is going to be the key, and the value is going to be the number 1. So when we want to add more elements to our dictionary, we're going to use commas. So the second element is going to be 2, and it's going to have the value of 2. And let's just end it at 3, which is going to have a value of 3. At the final element, you don't need to add a comma because you're not going to be adding any more elements. So this is what dictionaries are in Python. So in order to access an element in a dictionary, you're going to be using the keys, which are in this case 1, 2, and 3. So we can print out, let's say if we wanted to access the number 2 here, we're going to use the key 2. So we're going to say alpha num, and in square brackets, we're going to put in the key, which is the word 2. So we can save our file and see if it works. As you can see, it prints out the number 2. So that is how you would access different elements in a dictionary. You can also use a for loop to loop through a dictionary. So let's just see what happens when we do it straightforward by saying for items in alpha num, we want to print items. So we're going to save our file and we're going to run it. It prints out the word form of 1, 2, and 3. That means it's looping through the keys. Let's say we wanted to actually loop through the values. So what we need to do is say for items in alpha num dot. So we're going to be using one of those methods that we saw in lists, but in this case we're going to use keys. So what this is going to do is it's going to get us a list of the keys of our dictionary. So once we get the list of our keys, we can use those to access the actual values. So what we are going to do is print out alpha num, and in square brackets we're going to put in the items we just got. That means the items we just got from the list of keys. So this should print out the different values in our dictionary. So we can run it. And as you can see, it prints out the values. So this is just the basics of dictionaries. So we're going to look at the final container which we'll be seeing in this video, which is a tuple. A tuple is like a list, but in this case you can't change the individual elements of that list. So let's say what we didn't mention in the previous explanation is that you can change each element of a list. So let's say we go to the numbers list, and let's say we want to change the first element, which is at position 0. So we can just say equal to, and let's say we want it to be A. So now we can just save, we can print out numbers, and now we can save our file and we can run it. And as you can see, 1 has been replaced by A. That means lists are mutable. That means you can change each element of your list. But when it comes to tuples, you can't do that. That means once you set a tuple, that means you cannot change its elements. To create a tuple, we're going to be using normal brackets. So it's going to be, let's say we wanted to represent coordinates. So it's going to be coordinates, and we're going to set it equal to 2, 3. So this is simply a tuple. That means 2 and 3 cannot be changed. So let's just try to change it. So we're going to say coordinates, and let's say we wanted to change the first coordinate, and let's set it equal to 10. Now we're going to save our file and we're going to run it. As you can see, we get an error which says tuple does not support item assignment. This also has its own application. Each container we saw have their own application, which we will be seeing in future projects. So what does file handling mean? It simply means reading and writing files from our Python code. So we're going to create a new file. We're just going to call it files.py. And in here, we're going to be introduced to a new function called open. We've been using the print function a lot, so this is just another built-in function, which is called open. The open function, as its name says, it's going to open our files. So we're going to have open, and in parentheses, we're going to have first the name of the file we want to open. In this case, we're just going to call it hello.txt. And next, we're going to put in a letter that's going to represent how we want to open this file. There are 3 options, which are, the first one is A, which stands for append. Then there's R, which stands for read. And there's W, which stands for write, which each of them have their own application. In this case, since we don't have a hello.txt file, we want to create it, we're going to open it in write mode. So what the difference between write and append is that when we're using write, we're going to override everything that's already on the file if there's already some text. When we're using append, we're going to add it to the end of our file. So in this case, since we don't have any file, we're just going to use the W. And we want to save this into a variable since we want to manipulate and see what we can do with this file. So we're just going to save it in a variable called file. And as we've seen before, when we want to know what we can do with a variable, we use the dot operator. So we're going to say file dot, and we see different options. In this case, we want to write to the text file. So we're going to have write, and we're going to put in hello Ethiopia. And once we're done using our file, this is a very important step. We need to close our file. This is because when we create a file variable, it creates an object which takes up our laptops or our computer's resources. So we need to set those resources free. Python by itself does this for you, but it's a good practice to close the file. So we're going to do file.close, which is going to close our file. Now we can save our file and run it. And as we run it, you see there's nothing in the terminal because we're not printing anything. But if you look to the left, you can see a new file created, which is hello.txt. And if we open it, as you can see, we have written hello Ethiopia. So this is how you write to a file. let's say we wanted to add something else. Let's say we want to add hello Kenya, for example, and we want it to be on a new line. If we just ran this, it would be right next to hello Ethiopia, but we want it on a new line, so we're going to use a new line character, which is simply a backslash followed by n. This just represents a new line, so it just means enter, just equivalent to pressing enter. And now we're going to save our file and run it, and nothing happens in the terminal. If we open our hello.txt file, as you can see, hello Ethiopia is gone, but we still have hello Kenya and the new line, but this is not what we wanted to happen. We wanted hello Ethiopia to also be there. This is because we're using the W extension. So here, since we use W, it's going to overwrite everything. When we want to add something, we need to use the A tag. That means append. So it's going to append whatever we write to the end of the file. So we're going to use append, and we're going to write hello Ethiopia. And we're going to save our file and we're going to run it. And now if we go to hello.txt, as you can see, hello Ethiopia has been appended. So this is what you can do with the append and the write tag. Now let's look at the read tag. So let's change A to R, and we're going to do file.read. File.read is simply going to read the whole file. So let's just say we wanted to see what the file is, so we're going to print file.read, and we're going to save our file and we're going to run it. As you can see, it prints out everything that's in the file. Another thing we can do is run file.read line, which is going to read out a single line, or we can do file.read lines, which is going to read out all the lines, but it's going to store them in a list, which is very important, which we will be using in an exercise right now. So our exercise is going to be to get the sum of numbers that are in a text file. So we're going to go back to our hello.txt file, and we're going to remove all this, and we're going to put in numbers. We're going to have 10, 20, 30, and 40. So we want to find the sum of these numbers, which is going to be 100. So we're going to save this file, and we're going to go back to our Python file. And what we need to change here is we're going to get rid of our print statement. We want to open our file in the read tag, so we do not need to change that. So what we need to do is we need to loop over each line of our file, and we need to convert the numbers, which are going to obviously be in a string. We need to convert them into a number, or we need to convert them into an integer. Then we need to add them. So first we need to read from the file. So we're going to do file.read lines, which is going to store each line in a list. We can print it out and see what happens. So we're going to store it in a variable called numbers, and let's just print numbers and see what we get. We're going to save it and run it. As you can see, we get the numbers, but we also get another character next to each number. That is the new line character. That is because in our hello.txt file, as you can see, each number is on a new line. So that's why there's the new line character. So if we were to loop over this, so let's say we had a for loop. So we're going to say for number and numbers. We wanted to print out each number. And let's see what happens. We're going to save it and run it. As you can see, there's this extra space that we do not want. That is because there's two new line characters, one from the for loop itself and another that we have in the file. So we want to get rid of one of them. And now we're going to get introduced to a new action or a new method. So we're going to go to number, and we're going to put in dot, and we're going to use the strip method. What the strip method just does is it's going to remove extra space. So it's going to just remove the extra space we have here, and we can save our file and run it. And now it's gone back to a familiar form that we've seen when we run for loops. So this is good. This is the first step. But again, these numbers are strings. They're not integers. So what we need to do is cast them to integers. So we're going to cast them into an integer. And we do not just want to print them. We want to find their sum. So what we need to do is create a sum variable, and we're going to set it initially to 0. And we want to add each number to the sum. So instead of the print statement, we're going to add each number to the sum, which is going to be a weird syntax if you've not seen it before. It's going to be sum plus equals int number dot strip. What this means is it's going to add each number to sum. It just means if we expanded this, it would be sum is going to be equal to sum plus each number. So each iteration, a new number gets assigned to the number variable, and it's going to be added to our sum. And once we've done this, we can see if it works, and we're going to print sum, and we're going to save our file, and we're going to run it. As you can see, it prints out 100. That means it works. In Python, class is simply a blueprint for creating objects. So what does that mean? So let's consider this analogy. If we look at the production of a car, let's say, so in the production of a car, the blueprint for the car, that means before the car is built, the plans to build the car, that is the class. So the class is the blueprint. And when it comes to the object is something that is built based on the blueprint. So different cars, different type of cars. So that means the different cars you built are the objects. So you could have a car with a different color, with a different engine. So you can have different types of cars. Those actual cars are the objects, and the blueprint you used to build those cars, and that is the class. So now we're going to look at them through an example. So we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it classes.py. And the keyword to create a class is the class word. So we're going to create a class of an animal, let's say. So we're going to have class, and we're going to have the name of the class, which is going to be animal. Then we're going to have different functions or different things, different actions that animals do. So on this one, we're going to put in the actions that all animals do. So we are going to look at the specifics when we look at inheritance, which is going to be later in this video. So what do all animals do? They all eat. So we can have an eat function. I don't believe we've looked at functions in this series, so let's look at them now. Simply put, a function is a piece of code or a block of code that has a specific purpose. So let's just delete this class and let's look at an example of a function. So let's say we want a function that adds two numbers. So using the def keyword, we're going to define a function. Def stands for define. So we're going to say define, then we're going to have the name of our function. Let's just call it add. And as we said, it's going to add two numbers. So in the parentheses, we're going to put in what is called a parameter. Parameter is values that our functions take in as input. So in our add function, it's going to take two numbers as input, and it's going to return their sum. So it's going to take in two numbers. Let's just call them x and y. You can call them whatever you want. Then inside our function, we're going to return x plus y. This just means that our function is going to accept two inputs, two numbers, and using those numbers, it's going to add them and it's going to return them. That means, what does return mean? That means you can store the added value into a variable. If we just printed it out, for example, if we said print x plus y, that just prints out the sum to the terminal. That means you cannot save the value to a variable, it just prints it out. But when you use return, that means you can use a variable to store the sum. So in order to call our function or to use our function, we're going to create a variable called sum, and we're going to set it equal to add, and we're going to put in two numbers. let's say 4 and 5. And we're going to save our file, and we're going to run it. Nothing happens. That's because we just saved our sum to a variable. We have not printed out anything, so we're going to print sum. We're going to save our file again and run it. As you can see, it prints out 9. So this is just the basics of what a function is. So now we can go back to our class example. So we're going to have class animal, and inside here we're going to have different functions that explain what an animal does. So we said all animals eat, so we're going to have an eat function. When we're dealing with classes, there's this parameter that you always have to put in first. It won't make sense now, but we'll explain it deeply later. So we're going to have a self parameter. This self parameter just represents the object or the class itself, which will make sense later when we use it with a special type of function called initializing function, which we will be seeing later. So let's just print out eating. So let's just say eat is one of the common functions of animals. Let's also have another function called breathe. We'll have our self parameter, and we're going to print breathing. Now we have an animal class. Now to create an object, we need to use this class as a blueprint, and to do that, let's say we have a variable called animal1, and we're going to set it equal to the animal class, which has nothing in the parentheses, which we'll explain later, but let's just have it like this. And in order to access the eat and the breathe functions, we're going to use the dot operator. So we're going to have animal1 dot. And as you can see, we can see the breathe and the eat operator. So let's just test it out to see if it works. We're going to save our file, and we're going to run it. And as you can see, it prints out eating. That means it works. Now let's look at the special function I said before, which is the initializing function. So in order to write an initializing function, it has a special name, which is going to be underscore underscore init underscore underscore, then parentheses. And in the parentheses, we're going to have our default parameter, which is self. And inside here, we're going to have initial values of our animal. Let's say our animal has a name. So we want the user, or we want to put in the name of the animal in this parentheses when we create our object. So we're going to have a name. So we're going to put it next to self. So now we can put in a name when in the parentheses, and we want that name to be of the class. So now we're going to use what we have been using as the first parameter, which is self. So we're going to say self dot name is equals to name. So what does this mean? This means that animal is going to replace self. So it's going to be the name of the animal is whatever name we give it here, or whatever name we're going to put in the parentheses. So now we've initialized name. We can also have other variables. This is just a simple example. So now when we create our animal, we have to input the animal's name. Let's just not input anything, and let's just save our file and run it. As you can see, we get an error. It says one missing argument, that is name. So we're going to put in a name. Let's just say dog, and let's save our file and let's run it again, and it starts working properly. So this is a simple example of a class and an object. Now let's talk about inheritance. Inheritance means that we're going to have two separate classes, and one class is going to inherit different functions or variables from another class. So how is that going to work? So we're going to create a new class, and we're going to call it dog, which is a type of animal. So naturally it's going to inherit everything an animal does. So to inherit from another class, we're going to put in parentheses the class we want to inherit from, which is going to be animal. And now we can put in functions that are specific to a dog. So we're going to have a sound function. It's going to still have the self parameter, and here we're going to print barking. This is unique to a dog. And we're going to also create another class for a cat. It's also going to inherit animal, and it's also going to have, and the cat class is also going to have a sound function, which is going to print out meow. So now we've created different classes, and let's see how to create objects from them. So we're going to have dog1, which is going to be equal to dog. And if we do dog1 dot, we see the different functions. Now look here closely, because we also have the eat and the breathe function that it took from the animal class. So this means it inherited the two functions from its parent class. So we can call dog.eat. We can also call dog1.sound. We're going to save our file and see if it works. Again, we get an error, which is saying missing one argument. That's because dog inherited from animal. And in the animal class, we have a parameter we have to enter, which is name. So that means it's also going to inherit that. That means when we create a dog, we need to give it a name. Let's just say Jack. Now we are going to run our file again. And as you can see, it prints out both eating and barking. That means the inheritance worked. We can do the same for the cat class. So we can say, we can create cat1, and we're going to create a cat. So we're going to use the cat class, and we're going to call, let's just call the cat. And we're going to have cat1 dot eat, which is a common to all animals. And we're also going to have cat1 dot sound, which is unique to the cat class. So we can run it, and as you can see, we get eating and meow.
So this has been a full beginner's guide to Python. If you enjoyed the video, you can show your support by liking the video and subscribing to our channel. And you can find exercises for each subtopic in the description below.